Hello students, today we are going to discuss about Unit 2 Biogeochemical Cycles from BSc second year 3rd semester. Now in this chapter we are going to deal with various biogeochemical cycles: nitrogen cycle, carbon cycle, phosphorus cycle and water cycle. Nature has large number of elements which are required for normal growth of animals and plants. All these are called as biogenic salts that are very important for the cell. In ecology and earth science, a biogeochemical cycle or cycling of substances is a pathway by which a chemical substance moves through living and non-living components of the earth. There are biogeochemical cycles for carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur and water. And there are human induced cycles also, such as those for mercury and atrazine. In some cycles, there are reservoirs where a substance remains for a long period of time, like water in the lakes and oceans. These elements are found in different regions of the biosphere like air, soil and water. The elements like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, these are the basic components for the formation of carbohydrates and fats. Similarly, nitrogen is useful for the formation of proteins. Sulfur is useful for the formation of amino acids. Magnesium for the formation of chlorophyll. Phosphorus for the transformation of energy and for the formation of nucleic acids. And similarly, calcium for the formation of the cell wall. The other elements like copper, zinc, cobalt, molybdenum, magnesium and potassium are also required for various functions for the smooth functioning of various living organisms. Now, what are these biogeochemical cycles? We all know that the sun is the main source of energy on earth. Is it possible for an ecosystem to obtain energy without sunlight? No. The flow of energy in an ecosystem is an open system. The sun constantly gives us the energy in the form of light while it is continuously used up and lost in the form of heat throughout the trophic levels of a food web. Now the first one we are going to discuss about is nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen is converted into multiple chemical forms as it circulates among atmosphere, terrestrial and marine ecosystems. The conversion of nitrogen can be carried out through both biological and physical processes. The steps involved in the nitrogen cycle are nitrogen fixation, ammonification, nitrification and denitrification. Though the majority of the Earth's atmosphere has largest source of nitrogen, that is almost 80%, still it is not available for the biological use, leading to a scarcity of usable nitrogen in many types of ecosystems. Now, what are the different forms of nitrogen that we often see? Nitrogen is present in the environment in a wide variety of chemical forms, including organic nitrogen, that is NH+4, nitrite NO-2, nitrate NO-3, nitrous oxide N2O, nitric oxide NO or inorganic nitrogen gas, that is N2. Organic nitrogen may be in the form of living organisms or humus or in the intermediate products of organic matter through decomposition. The main purpose of nitrogen cycle is to transform nitrogen from one form to another form. Many of these conversions are carried out by microbes either to harvest energy or to accumulate nitrogen in a form needed by them for their growth. For example, the nitrogenous wastes in animal urine are broken down by nitrifying bacteria in the soil to be used as a new product. Now, what are the key steps involved in the nitrogen cycle? The first one is nitrogen fixation. The process in which a bacteria called as rhizobium, which is present in the root nodules of leguminous plants, converts inorganic atmospheric nitrogen into usable nitrates and nitrites so that they can be used by the plants. It is called as nitrogen fixation. Now, apart from nitrogen fixation by rhizobium bacteria, there is another method which is called as non-biological nitrogen fixation method, that is lightning. So, though lightning appears for few seconds, it converts huge amount of nitrogen into usable nitrates and nitrites. The second step in this is assimilation. Assimilation is nothing but utilizing or using. Incorporation or usage of nitrogen by the plants to prepare plant protein is called as assimilation. Now, the third one is ammonification. Conversion of organic nitrogen compounds into ammonia, in which several decomposers converts animal and plant products through decomposition. This is called as ammonification. Now, the next one is nitrification. This ammonia converts into nitrate. So, whatever ammonia was prepared in the process of ammonification, this gets converted into nitrate. Now, the last method is denitrification. The conversion of nitrate back into atmospheric nitrogen is called as denitrification. Now, what are the stages of water cycle? Look at this flow chart. We can clearly understand the steps in nitrogen cycle, that is nitrogen fixation, how atmospheric nitrogen is converted into nitrates and nitrites by the plants, that is by the rhizobium bacteria. And we can also see denitrification, nitrification and ammonification processes. So, basically the nitrogen cycle has 5 steps: nitrogen fixation, nitrogen assimilation, ammonification, nitrification and denitrification. In this, the nitrogen fixation, it is of again 2 types. One is non-biological method, second one is biological nitrogen fixation. This biological nitrogen fixation is again has 3 steps: asymbiotic, associative and symbiotic. Nitrification is again further divided into oxidation of ammonia to nitrite, again oxidation of nitrite to nitrates. Now, what is the importance of nitrogen cycle? Nitrogen cycle has a significant ecological and economic role, which can be summarized as follows. Nitrogen cycle helps in converting nitrogen to usable form for plants and other organisms. Since nitrogen is crucial part of cell, it is a component in the formation of various biomolecules. The photosynthesis process in plants, they need chlorophyll, and nitrogen is one of the major components in the formation of chlorophyll. This process also involves the process of ammonification, and during this cycle nitrates and nitrites are released into soil, which will enhance the fertility of the soil and increases the productivity. It involves the process of denitrification, where the water treatment facilities convert the excess nitrate into nitrogen gas, which is then released into the atmosphere back. Let us look into carbon cycle. The carbon cycle is the biogeochemical cycle in which carbon is exchanged among the biosphere, pedosphere, geosphere, hydrosphere and atmosphere of the earth. Carbon is the main component of biological compounds as well as a major component of many minerals such as limestone. Along with the nitrogen cycle and water cycle, the carbon cycle comprises a sequence of events that are key to make earth capable of sustaining life. It describes the movement of carbon. It is recycled and reused throughout the biosphere. The carbon cycle was initially discovered by Joseph Priestley and Anton Lavoisier and popularized by Humphrey Davy. What are the steps involved in the carbon cycle? Carbon present in the atmosphere is absorbed by plants for photosynthesis. These plants are then consumed by animals and carbon gets bioaccumulated into their bodies. These animals and plants eventually die, and upon decomposing, carbon is released back into the atmosphere. Some of the carbon that is not released back into the atmosphere eventually become fossil fuels. These fossil fuels are then used for man-made activities which pump more carbon back into the atmosphere. Now, the global carbon cycle is now usually divided into the following major reservoirs of carbon. One is the atmosphere, the terrestrial biosphere, the ocean including dissolved inorganic carbon and living and non-living marine biota. the sediments including fossil fuels, freshwater systems and non-living organic material. The Earth's interior, that is mantle and crust. These carbon stores interact with the other components through geological processes. The carbon exchanges between reservoirs occur as a result of various chemical, physical, geological and biological processes. The ocean contains the largest active pool of carbon near the surface of the Earth. The natural flow of carbon between the atmosphere, ocean, terrestrial ecosystems and sediments is fairly balanced so that carbon levels would be roughly stable without human influence. Now, how carbon cycle takes place on land? Carbon in the atmosphere is present in the form of carbon dioxide. Carbon enters the atmosphere through natural processes such as respiration and industrial applications such as burning fossil fuels. The process of photosynthesis involves the absorption of carbon dioxide by plants to produce carbohydrates. Carbon compounds are passed along the food chain from the producers to consumers. The role of decomposers is to eat the dead organisms and return the carbon from their body back into the atmosphere. Now, what happens in oceanic carbon cycle? This is essentially a carbon cycle, but in the sea. Ecologically, oceans take in more carbon than it gives out. Hence, it is called a carbon sink. Marine animals convert carbon to calcium carbonate, and this forms the raw building materials required to create hard shells similar to the ones found in clams and oysters. Even when organisms with calcium carbonate shells die, their body decomposes, leaving behind their hard shells. These accumulate on the seafloor and are eventually broken down by the waves and compacted under enormous pressure, forming limestone. When these limestone rocks are exposed to air, they get withered and the carbon is released back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. Now, let us look into human activity, the role of human activity in the carbon cycle. Since the Industrial Revolution, human activity has modified the carbon cycle by changing its components' function and directly adding carbon into the atmosphere. The largest human impact on the carbon cycle is through direct emission from burning fossil fuels, which transfers carbon from the geosphere into the atmosphere. The rest of this increase is caused mostly by changes in land use, particularly deforestation. Another direct human impact on the carbon cycle is the chemical process of calcination of limestone for clinker production, which releases carbon dioxide. Clinker is an industrial precursor of cement. Let us see what is deforestation. So, deforestation for agricultural purposes removes forests which hold large amounts of carbon and replaces them generally with agricultural or urban areas. Air pollution, for example, damages plants and soils, while many agricultural and land practices lead to higher erosion rates, washing carbon out of soils and decreasing plant productivity. Now, how is it important, the carbon cycle, for the mankind? Even though carbon dioxide is found in small traces in the atmosphere, it plays a vital role in balancing the energy and traps the long wave radiations from the sun. Therefore, it acts like a blanket over the planet. If the carbon cycle is disturbed, it will result in serious consequences such as climatic changes and global warming. Carbon is an integral component of every life form on Earth, from proteins and lipids to even our DNA. Furthermore, all known life on Earth is based on carbon. Hence, the carbon cycle, along with the nitrogen cycle and oxygen cycle, plays a vital role in the existence of life on Earth. Now, let us recall the key points on carbon cycle. Carbon cycle explains the movement of carbon between the Earth's biosphere, geosphere, hydrosphere and atmosphere. Carbon is an important element of life. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is taken up by green plants and other photosynthetic organisms and is converted into organic molecules that travel through the food chain. Carbon atoms are then released as carbon dioxide when organisms respire. The formation of fossil fuels and sedimentary rocks contribute to the carbon cycle for very long periods. The carbon cycle is associated with the availability of other compounds as well. Let us learn about phosphorus cycle. It describes the movement of phosphorus through the lithosphere, hydrosphere and biosphere. The atmosphere does not play a significant role in the movement of phosphorus because phosphorus and phosphorus based compounds are usually solids. On the land, phosphorus gradually becomes less available to plants over thousands of years because it is slowly lost in runoff. Low concentration of phosphorus in solid reduces plant growth and slows soil microbial growth. Soil microorganisms act as both sinks and resources of available phosphorus in the biogeochemical cycle. Transformation of phosphorus are chemical, biological and microbiological which occur locally. Humans' involvement caused major changes to global phosphorus cycle through shipping of phosphorus minerals, use of phosphorus fertilizers and shipping of food from the farms to cities where it is lost as effluent. It forms a significant part of the structural framework of DNA and RNA. They are also an important component of ATP. Humans contain 80% of phosphorus in teeth and bones. Phosphorus cycle is a very slow process. Various weather processes help to wash the phosphorus present in the rocks into the soil. Phosphorus is absorbed by the organic matter in the soil which is used for various biological processes. Since phosphorus and phosphorus containing compounds are present only on land, atmosphere plays a significant role in the phosphorus cycle. Now, the various steps in the phosphorus cycle are weathering, absorption by plants, absorption by animals, return to the environment through decomposition. Now, let us see one by one. What is weathering? Phosphorus is found in the rocks in abundance. That is why the phosphorus cycle starts in the earth's crust. The phosphate salts are broken down from the rocks. These salts are washed away into the ground where they mix in the soil. The next step is absorption by plants. The phosphate salts dissolved in water are absorbed by the plants. However, the amount of phosphorus present in the soil is very less. That is why the farmers apply phosphate fertilizers on agricultural lands. The aquatic plants absorb inorganic phosphorus from the lower layers of the water bodies. Since phosphate salts do not dissolve in water properly, they affect plant growth in aquatic ecosystems. Absorption by animals. The animals absorb phosphorus from the plants or by consuming plant-eating animals. The rate of the phosphorus cycle is faster in plants and animals when compared to rocks. Return of phosphorus back to the ecosystem. When the plants and animals die, they are decomposed by the microorganisms. During this process, the organic form of phosphorus is converted into the inorganic form, which is recycled to soil and water. Soil and water will end up in sediments and rocks, which will again release phosphorus by weathering. Thus, the phosphorus cycle starts over. If you look at this picture, you will clearly understand how the phosphorus cycle takes place in the atmosphere. Now, how is it going to impact on humans? A number of human activities, use of fertilizers, artificial eutrophication, etc. has a great impact on the phosphorus cycle. The phosphorus fertilizers increase the level of phosphorus in the soil. Overuse of these fertilizers reduces the fertility of the soil and is also harmful to the microorganisms present in the soil. When these are washed away into the nearby water bodies, they are hazardous to aquatic life. During the shipping of food from farms to cities, the amount of phosphorus that is washed away in water causes eutrophication. This leads to the growth of algae. These form algal blooms or dye, which is toxic to the aquatics ecosystem. Let us now learn about water cycle. During this process, water changes its state from one phase to another, but the total number of water particles remains the same. In other words, if it were possible to collect and boil 100 grams of water, it will still retain a mass of 100 grams as steam. Likewise, if 100 grams of steam is collected and condensed, the resultant water would still weigh 100 grams. So, water changes its state through a variety of processes from evaporation, melting and freezing to sublimation, condensation and deposition. So, all these changes require the application of energy. This picture clearly shows how a water cycle takes place: evaporation, condensation, precipitation and collection. Now, let us discuss about the different stages of water cycle. The first one is evaporation. The sun is the ultimate source of energy and it powers most of the evaporation that occurs on earth. Evaporation generally happens when water molecules at the surface of water bodies become excited and rise into the air. These molecules with the highest kinetic energy accumulate into water vapor clouds. Evaporation usually takes place below the boiling point of water. Another process called transpiration occurs when evaporation occurs through the leaves of plants. This process contributes to a large percentage of water in the atmosphere. The second step is sublimation. Sublimation occurs when snow or ice changes directly into water vapor without becoming water. It usually occurs as a result of dry winds and low humidity. Sublimation can be observed on mountain peaks where the air pressure is quite low. The low air pressure helps to sublimate the snow into water vapor as less energy is utilized in the process. Another example of sublimation is the phase where fog billows from dry ice. On earth, the primary source of sublimation is from the ice sheets covering the poles of the earth. The third step is condensation. The water vapor that accumulated in the atmosphere eventually cools down to the low temperatures found at higher altitudes. These vapors become tiny droplets of water and ice, eventually coming together to form clouds. The next step is precipitation. Above 0 degrees centigrade, the vapors will condense into water droplets. However, it cannot condense without dust or other impurities. Hence, water vapor attach itself onto the particle surface. Even enough droplets merge, it falls out of the clouds and onto the ground below. This process is called precipitation or rainfall. In particularly cloud weather or extremely low air pressure, the water droplets freeze and fall as snow or hail. The next step is infiltration. Rainwater gets absorbed into the ground through the process of infiltration. The level of absorption varies based on the material the water has seeped into. For instance, rocks will retain comparatively less water than soil. Groundwater can either follow streams of rivers, but sometimes it might just sink deeper, forming aquifer. The last method is, or the last step is, we can say it is runoff. If the water from rainfall does not form aquifers, it follows gravity, often flowing down the sides of mountains and hills, eventually forming rivers. This process is called runoff. In colder regions, ice caps form when the amount of snowfall is faster than the rate of evaporation or sublimation. The biggest ice caps on earth are found at the poles. Let us look into the implications of water cycle. The water cycle has a tremendous impact on the climate. For instance, the greenhouse effect will cause a rise in temperature. Without the evaporative cooling effect of the water cycle, the temperature on Earth would rise drastically. The water cycle is also an integral part of the other biogeochemical cycles. Water cycle affects all processes on Earth. The water cycle is also known to clean the air. For instance, during the process of precipitation, water vapors have to attach themselves onto the particles of dust. In polluted cities, the raindrops, apart from picking up dust, also pick up water soluble gas and pollutants as they fall from the clouds. Raindrops are also known to pick up biological agents such as bacteria and industrial soot particles and smoke. Now, with this we have come to the end of this chapter. From this chapter, let us see what are the types of questions that we frequently get to see. Answer the following questions in about 30 lines. Write in detail the importance of biogeochemical cycles. Write about carbon cycle and its importance. Write about nitrogen cycle and add a note on its importance in atmosphere. Write about phosphorus importance in nature. Detail the need of water in atmosphere. Similarly, we can also see this short type of questions. Answer the following in about 10 lines each. Write about reservoirs in biogeochemical cycles. Write about nitrogen fixation. Write about terrestrial biosphere in carbon cycle. Write about human influence on nitrogen cycle. Write about human influence on carbon cycle. Write about human influence on phosphorus cycle. Write about effects on biogeochemical cycling of water in nature. What is the ecological function of phosphorus cycle? Write about terrestrial biosphere of carbon cycle. We can also look into this question, write about process of water cycle in nature. So, when this type of question comes, we can completely write the points that are mentioned in this chapter. Hope you all have understood the chapter. Thank you.